I don't know. No, see, Naya was not here last week either.
She's having a surgery.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, everybody pray. Can we just stop for a minute and pray for Naya? Okay. Dear Lord, please be with Naya today. Give her courage. Give the doctors skill in their work, and we just pray that this procedure would correct all the pain that she's having and all the trouble. Be with her and her parents and her family. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Okay, let's dig in to Aristotle. Yeah, I feel like my brain is not, some of the cylinders are not firing. New spark plugs or something. I'm just. So I sent an email to your parents already, and the weekly thing, which some of you get. And so I'm making an offer, which no one may take me up on, which is so fine. But I don't have anything to do on May the 4th. I'm not celebrating Star Wars Day. And so I'm inviting anybody who wants to come to Orion and have class. Yes. If anybody wants to. So here's what I said in the email. And I'm so not a fit, because some of you live in Iowa, some of you, it's kind of a long drive. Although I can get home from here in about 20 minutes. Because it's just all interstate and then Highway 150. Like it's really a straight shot. But I realized that for a lot of you, like, we already made plans, we knew Skole was over, it's totally fine. I am not going to try to cram 2 weeks worth into next week, all right? So you have options, and the first option is you just skip the last week and you don't read about Alexander the Great, which I'm fine with. Second option, I will record the class, and anybody who wanted to watch that following week could do so. But I thought, oh, what the heck? And I thought maybe somebody might be curious about Mrs. Ferguson's crazy house and the weird stuff that I have. So I'm just throwing it out there, and if we can get at least a few people that want to do it, I will do it. But if only like 1 or 2 people, that would just be kind of awkward. And I'll just say, you know, I'll just have an open house or something like that if anybody wants to come see my personal library or something like that and hang out, and I'll bake cookies or something. So I've asked your parents just to let me know by next Wednesday if somebody might actually want to do a final class and just meet in my living room and talk about Alexander the Great. And if you don't, I'm just not offended by that in any way. So you can think about that, but for some people, it's just you're busy, or it's a long way, and I'm not offended by that. That's why I don't do all my classes in my house. Okay, art of the week. I am hoping it's another undressed lady. Sorry, gentlemen, but you know, but the ladies had to deal with the undressed gentleman earlier, and now it's. But I'm hoping that everyone recognizes this. Does everybody recognize this? Okay, I'm not judging you if you don't recognize this. But this is probably the most famous Greek statue ever. Yes. Oh. I didn't see that. Because she's not endowed well enough.
Either I'm just a pure part, or I just.
It's okay. The short hair. No, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. This. What do we call her? What is her name? The Venus de Milo. The Venus de Milo. For most of my growing up, I was an idiot and had crummy schooling, and so I just thought Milo must be the guy that made her. It's like the Venus of Milo. Milo must be the guy. He made her. Because there's Milo the wrestler they talk about. That could be Milo the sculptor. No, she is Venus from the island of Milos. Venus de Milo is the Italian Milos. Milos is the island where the Athenians showed up in Thucydides and said, the strong do what they can and the weak suffer what they must. It's that island. Except she was made a couple hundred years later, well, 150 years later. 100 years later. This is a Hellenistic piece. This is after Alexander the Great. And we have gone from Praxiteles. I showed you that Venus that was a Roman copy, you know, that she was like taking her stuff off to get in the bath or something like that, that it was, well, this sensuous Venus, Aphrodite. And this is like 50, 75 years later, where it's become a thing. Okay, apparently we do partially nude Venuses. That's a thing now, and it wasn't a thing before. She is unfortunately missing her arms. This is painfully obvious, but so this is not a Roman copy. There's no prop, and this is legit. They dug her up on the island of Milos. She is the Venus of Milos. And so they found her left arm and hand. So this one, you know, and it's holding the golden apple that Paris awarded her for, you know, in return for Helen. I just think it's interesting because this work of art shows up a lot. If you're familiar with Disney's movie Hercules, I think there's where he and Meg are standing there, and then he throws something. I don't remember what happens, but it knocks the statue's arms off, and it turns into the Venus de Milo, because it's exactly that with the arms. And he just kind of shrugs. I haven't watched Hercules in a while. I don't remember how it pans out, but the joke is, oh, it's the Venus de Milo. All right. But this is from a Greek island, and this is one of the earliest found Greek statues. So this is a player in the Renaissance, okay? This is as they start digging up Greek and Roman artwork, and the people in Europe say, wow, this is really good. Let's do something like this. And the Renaissance, that's one of the reasons that the Renaissance takes hold. So the Venus de Milo, actually from that island where the Athenians went and they killed all the men and enslaved all the women and children, which is unfortunate.
Am I the only one who thought that it was perfect? Yeah, I think so.
It is totally fine that you thought that.
I mean, for a while.
Do you know what young people think all peculiar things about things.
What should I do with my hands? I don't know where to put my...
Let's just take them off. Maybe the artist just wasn't good at arms and hands, like you're just not doing that part. No, she has them. She had them. Let's take a look at Ethics Book 3. Last week, we talked a lot about what is the point of living. What is the good for human beings? And he decided it was happiness. But we put parameters on our happiness, right? Not just la la, I'm so happy, I have ice cream and sunshine and rainbows. It's more of an abiding state of being of the soul, which he described as an activity of the soul in accordance with virtue. That's what we're made for. Like joy. Like the joy that living within God's will gives us. You know, if you ever thought about that God does not give us rules because he wants us to follow all the rules. He gives us rules because there is where life is, and outside of that is death. They're your friends. You know, if I tell my kid, don't run out in the street, it's not an arbitrary rule. And it isn't, oh, I just made up this rule, or I will love you more if you don't run out in the street. It's life, death is in the middle of the street. Don't go there. That's why I tell my kid not to do that, right? God says, I don't want you to do these things, because that is where death is. It's just like eating the fruit, right? That is where death is. Don't do it. And so, I'm not sure why I went off on that tangent. Oh, it was acting in accordance with virtue. So our purpose as human beings is fulfilled when we live within God's will. Not because we're following rules. It is because we are partaking of the place where life is. Does that make sense? I want to live within his will because that is where life is. I don't want to go to the place where death is. That's a dangerous place. Any more than I want my kids to play in the road. So Aristotle, of course, didn't understand. He did not have the revelation. He did not understand, well, what does that mean to live in accordance with God's will? And we've seen the gods, the Greek gods, even if you reject the Homer version, you know, like Socrates did, they still don't have a real will. You know, like, what is the will of Zeus? Is it different than fate? Is it different than... Do you know what I mean? There's no real equivalent in Greek mythology. The Christianity brings something new to the table, that this is a loving person, God is. who wants us to live where there is life. And we strayed where there is death. And he's just trying to show us, no, if you live here, I will give you the grace to accomplish it, but living in this place, this is life. And living out there, that is death. So he asks, Aristotle then asks, so if this is an activity of our soul in accordance with virtue, as he understood virtue, all right, we're, as Christians, we're going to put a different spin. I mean, we still have some of the same virtues, right? Temperance, moderation, is a Christian virtue. Gluttony is condemned in the Bible as a sin. It just is. Gluttons make the list of some of those, all those that will not inherit the kingdom of God. It's like, oh. Also, don't you love the one disobedient to their parents? That makes one of the list too. Ouch. Ouch, that hits you. Like, I'm okay, the drunkenness and adultery, not doing that, but the, ooh, disobedient to your parents and gluttons, that one hits close to home. So we have to know what the virtues are if we're going to live in accordance with virtue. So he starts to examine those. But he does say in Book 2 that this is something we choose, right? We talked last week, I think, about not accidentally being virtuous, right? It has to do with I have chosen a particular thing at a particular time. I've chosen the right thing at the right time with the right person in the right amount, all those parameters. And so if I accidentally, I'm giving to a charity and I meant to give $2, and I'm doing it online and I accidentally give $2,000 because I just don't know when to stop pressing zero. Okay, that doesn't make me the most generous person on the planet. That just makes me sort of a doofus, for hitting the zero so many times. I can't accidentally be a generous person. Like, just by, I thought I was tipping the waitress, a 5, and it was actually a 50. I'm not now a great tipper. I'm just nearsighted, apparently, and I need to look at my bills more closely. So in that case, then Aristotle feels obligated to take a look at what does it mean to choose. And what does it mean that an act can be voluntary, I meant to do it, or involuntary, it just happened and I didn't really mean to do it, which takes us into Book 3. So in case you're wondering why, especially since it's been a week since we read the other one, why in the world are we talking about voluntary and involuntary actions? That's why. Because if I'm going to practice virtue, it has to be voluntary and a choice that I've made, or I'm not feeding that disposition, that habit circle. I have to choose it. So the first question I asked you, so I'm sorry. Someday I'm going to learn not to answer my own questions, or maybe look at them before I don't shut up. Why does Aristotle explore acts that are voluntary and what are involuntary? If somebody answered that, you can give me your answer, but I know I just answered it. Alex, what did you say?
I'm not sure about this answer, but why does Aristotle explore what acts are voluntary and what are involuntary? Because, like you said, in virtue, you can't be involuntarily virtuous.
Mm-hmm.
And I also saw that in justice, you can involuntarily break the law and not be a part of it.
Oh, yes, exactly. And our court systems do recognize that, right? We have, manslaughter would be a category of harming someone, but without the intent to harm. But I don't know. What if you accidentally? Like, this is too stupid to even mention, but it's the best I can come up with. Like, I'm just really honest. I have trouble. I just don't want to take anything that's not mine. And this is not a virtue in me. It's just the way I am. And so, sometimes you forget to put something out of the cart on the checkout thing. Like, once I forgot to put a toothbrush up there, and I got out and I was putting my bags on. I didn't pay for that toothbrush. So I had to go back in and pay for the toothbrush. If I had, that's fine. If I had accidentally just taken it home, that doesn't make me a shoplifter. Do you know what I mean? That wouldn't be, and I feel like well, first of all, they wouldn't put me in prison for taking a toothbrush, so that's why it's a bad example. But if you inadvertently picked something up and took it away, I feel like our legal system would understand but couldn't anybody say that then?
Yeah. Well, in like California, as long as you steal under $500, you can get away with it.
Because what if you were in a store and your kid put something in your purse? What if you were in a store and your kid put something in your purse and you didn't know it? And they're too little to know that it's wrong. Do you know what I mean? They just like, oh, it's a toddler. Like, oh, I like this, I want it.
I feel like back in the old days where towns were a lot more sense of community and everyone kind of knew each other. But when it was like you could just settle it, like the people who were there.
Yeah.
Like you're just like, oh, I'll put that back. I'm sorry.
Yeah, my kid put this. I didn't know.
Everyone's all angry at each other. No one knows each
This
other.
is true.
No one wants to sue each other.
Because I could just be making it up. I could just be saying, oh, my kid put that in, I didn't know. So anyway, I'm sorry. This was all a very bad illustration. Yes. That would be really, really bad. I feel like you should be punished for that just because. Yeah.
I don't feel like you would just like there's like a big like office and you're like sitting down and talking next to like it would purposefully like not terrible.
Yes.
So there's objectionable negligence now, like for our.
But, okay, hold on to that, because I think we're going to come back to that later. The idea of the circumstances under which someone might inadvertently do something, but if they are, like I said, being negligent, or if they are, willfully ignorant of something that they should know, then we hold them responsible for that. Okay, can you hold that, can you put that back in the back of your head, and then we'll bring it back out when we get there? Because if I start going through all my pages, I'll get lost. He says at the beginning of book 3, since moral goodness is concerned with feelings and actions, and those that are voluntary receive praise or blame, whereas those that are involuntary receive pardon and sometimes pity, students of moral goodness must presumably determine the limits of the voluntary and the involuntary, because then we know if you're actually practicing virtue and if it's something praiseworthy. And then he says an involuntary act is performed under compulsion or through ignorance. Okay, we all understand under compulsion. Somebody put a gun to your head and they made you do it. Or somebody kidnapped your family and they said, unless you rob this bank, I'm going to kill your family. I feel like that is a movie of some sort. Aren't there movies where people get kidnapped, their families get kidnapped and they make you do something bad? I don't know. Can't think of what it is offhand. That's obviously compulsion. So when I rob the bank, there are extenuating circumstances, and Aristotle says, even though I am the one who robs the bank, see, someone's forcing my hand, someone's forcing me to do it, and I don't feel like Aristotle or current legal authorities would hold me responsible after the whole truth came out. Well, she did it because they were going to kill her family. The littler kids just read Macbeth, and I made them write whether Macbeth or the witches was more responsible for what happened. Did I do that with you? I reuse things very gladly. And so, but for most of it boiled down to, well, but nobody compelled Macbeth. They lured him, perhaps, with half-truths, and his own ambition carried him away, though, and it might have been fed by the witches, but he held the dagger. He did it. And so, but if you did it, but somebody was threatening you, unless you did, that wouldn't be a free act anymore, would it? So that, under compulsion we understand, but ignorance, now, oh, it's sooner than I thought. Now bring the ignorance thing back out of the back of your head and put it in the front. It seems, this is the bottom of page 52, it seems that there is a distinction between acting through ignorance and acting in ignorance. When a man is drunk or in a rage, his actions are considered to be the result not of ignorance, but one of the said conditions. We don't say he did this because he did this in ignorance. We say he did it because he was drunk, because he was so angry. But he acts not knowingly, but in ignorance. He is in a state of ignorance currently because he's drunk or because he's blinded by rage. As a matter of fact, every bad man is ignorant of what he ought to do and refrain from doing, and it is just this sort of fault that makes people unjust and generally bad. An act is not properly called involuntary if the agent is ignorant of his own advantage. For what makes an act voluntary is not ignorance of the choice, this is a cause of wickedness, nor ignorance of the universal, but particular ignorance of the circumstances and objects of the action. It is on this that pity and pardon depend, because a man who acts in ignorance of any such detail is an involuntary agent. So he's spreading involuntary pretty wide. That the drunk person does it, but he's in ignorance. He's, that every bad person in, what? Ah, yes. Yes. Yes, which is why we would still find that person worthy of blame, right? Because I'm sorry I was drunk is really not a legal excuse. Because you have chosen to place yourself in ignorance. So, we're not, apparently hopefully none of you are drinking to excess, since you're not of drinking age, and when you are, I hope you will never drink to excess. And that is one of the things I've done things I'm not proud of, but drink to excess is not one of them. I have never drunk enough to not be in my right mind. So I don't know what that's like. But here's a willful ignorance that I can, maybe I've been guilty of, or not this way, but we're all drivers maybe have been guilty of it at some time or another. I'm speeding, and the cop stops me. I'm sorry, officer, I didn't know what the speed limit was. And maybe that's because, every time I pass the speed limit sign, which is posted fairly frequently on most roads, I just look away, you see? I don't know what the speed limit is. I choose to be ignorant. And it's kind of silly sounding, like anybody would actually do that. But I think there might be things in our lives that we do something similar. We might be tempted to I don't want to know if that's wrong or not, because I want to do it. Don't tell me if that's wrong, because I just really want to do it. And when I find out, then I'm held responsible. But as long as I don't know, I'm just acting in ignorance. Yes. So when I choose to be ignorant, like some things we're just ignorant of, and it's not our faults. But when I choose it, and this is interesting because, Thomas Aquinas, I've mentioned him more than once since we talked about Aristotle, took Aristotle's ideas and said, okay, we have revelation from the Bible, from the church fathers, and we have Aristotle, who's a brilliant man, and how do we mesh the two however we can? And he took this idea from Aristotle, but he made it a Christian idea. He said, if you choose not to know what God's commands are, but they are all around you. You have a Bible, you have the church, all these are available to you, and you choose, no, I don't want to know, I don't want that. You are still responsible before God for those acts, because you could have not been ignorant. You could easily have not been ignorant. You just wanted to be, because you wanted to do whatever the heck you wanted, right? And we didn't want to know. And so it's interesting. I mean, it's not something we think about, but the things, we know we don't blame people. Oh, you ate those cookies? Those cookies were for the potluck. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I thought you baked them for our family. Totally understandable, right? This happens all the time, and these things, we do things in ignorance. But then to extrapolate out of that and expand it and think, what things do I do that are in ignorance, but I've chosen to be ignorant? See, then I'm responsible. Yeah.
So in ignorance would be like excuse to get drunk, but through ignorance to say that someone is broke.
Yes. Or in ignorance would be if I choose to be ignorant, and through ignorance might be the ignorance that I just can't help. There was no way for me to know that information. Yes, I didn't know what alcohol would do to me. That could happen, to a person. I mean, I don't know how that would, but it could happen. It could happen. So he says, anyone who is ignorant of any of these things is considered to have acted involuntarily. And he lists a group of things on page 53. The agent, the person doing it, the act, the object or medium of the act, the instrument, the aim of the act, the manner of the act. I got to read this just because I think it's hilarious. Now, nobody in his right mind could be ignorant of all these circumstances. Obviously, he cannot be ignorant, one, of the agent. How could he fail to know himself? But he may not realize, two, what he is doing. As people say they were carried away while speaking, or did not know it was a secret. Or I didn't know it was a secret. And this is funny. Also, listen, Aeschylus, our playwright Aeschylus, famously, apparently, divulged some of the secrets of the Eleusinian mysteries in one of his plays. It's like, dude, you can't say that. That's in the mysteries. Like, oh, I didn't know that was a secret. This was Aeschylus's. All right. Or, this is my personal favorite. Or like the man who let off the catapult because he wanted to show how it worked. I really want to know more about this guy. This is all we know. Apparently it's a thing. It happened recently. It was in the news. That guy. I think you just pull this lever and he did it. And he just catapulted something. Yeah. Or three, this is the object or medium of the act. A person might think that his son was an enemy. This is from a play, he quotes. 4, the tool, or that a sharp-pointed spear had a button on it, or that a stone was a piece of pumice. Or 5, the aim. One might kill someone with a dose of a drug intended to save his life. Or 6, the manner. Hit one's opponent when one meant only to seize his hand, as in finger wrestling. Which the footnote says wrestling at arm's length. Like where you can't, but why do they call it finger wrestling? I'm so confused. I want to know about the catapult guy and the finger wrestling. It's like, tell me more.
If he's at arm's length, how can you hit him?
I don't know. Aristotle. We need more information here. So this sounds very, highly philosophical, technical language, but I mean, we do it all the time. Oh, I hit you with the snowball, but I didn't know there was ice inside it. I didn't know I made an ice ball. Oh, well, yeah, and then is it in ignorance or through ignorance? But we're assuming you don't know. We have all done something to someone inadvertently, that we didn't realize was going to hurt them. We didn't realize the consequences. Children do this all the time, right? But adults do it too. We just didn't realize, we didn't think through the consequences, or we honestly thought, how many times I toss a ball to a kid, I thought you were looking, and the ball whacks them in the nose or whatever. I thought you were ready. I thought you were ready. Okay, so these misunderstandings, this is not voluntary. So Aristotle wants to make very sure that you understand that when we're talking about activities of virtue, you don't stumble into it, you don't do it ignorantly. These are choices and they are deliberate voluntary acts, yes.
Involuntary or non-voluntary?
Because he does make a distinction between that, doesn't he?
If you didn't mean to do it, involuntary is you
Yeah.
absolutely cannot help you with it.
Where did he say that?
Yeah, I don't remember.
What I got is that, so involuntary actions are performed under compulsion or through ignorance.
Okay.
Non-voluntary actions are all actions done through ignorance that do not cause the agent subsequent pain or offense.
Okay, yes, I remember that, you quoted that out of the book, yes, I remember that. I don't remember what page it's on, though. Well, we'll have to accept his definition since we're reading his book, but then personally, we can adjust.
So the involuntary one is on like the first part.
What page are you on? Oh, on the very first,
The first page of chapter.
oh, okay, yes, yes, uh-huh. Where's the non-voluntary?
So I kind of got like it's like non-voluntary is.
Oh, I found it. It's on page 52, between the 15 and 20. Every act done through ignorance is non-voluntary. It says exactly what Matthew said. Is non-voluntary, but it is involuntary only when it causes the agent subsequent pain and repentance. Yes. For if a man has done any act through ignorance and is not in the least upset about it, although he has not acted voluntarily, not knowing what he was doing, he has not acted involuntarily either, since he feels no pain. That almost sounds like it's non-voluntary if you feel no remorse about doing it.
That's what I was thinking. I thought it was a pretty distinct policy, but maybe he's saying it's a result of something that actually happened. It's a sign that I think if you meant what I'm about to say, you would say it. It's essentially like say, I'm coerced into killing someone or stealing something, and then I'm like, talk to him like, oh, I'm so sorry, I was bored. That would be involuntary. But non-voluntary would be like I accidentally press a button and kill someone, and I have no fear. So I'm not going to feel remorse because I never knew.
Okay. So I shouldn't feel remorse because there was nothing I could have done to change it?
If you accidentally killed someone, you would still feel guilty.
I would think so.
Obviously, but it could be like you never found out.
Oh.
He never says that, so.
Here, just.
You're dealing with like rob the bank or I'll kill your family, like you wouldn't feel, I mean, I don't think you would feel remorse for robbing.
No, I don't think I would.
I feel that that's really justified by
That would be non-voluntary then.
Involuntary, you were for us to kill someone. Not voluntary, you have to choose your kill them.
Here, what did Gabby say? Here, shh. What did Gabby say? Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
yes.
like you would never feel guilty about something you never do. But here's the
Because you
thing,
never
the
knew.
only problem with that is I feel like he would just say that, but he never does. All he says, and I kept on looking, I looked online as well, it's just always, it's essentially involuntary action, but you don't feel guilty.
Well, maybe part of our problem here is if scholars are correct that these are lecture notes of Aristotle, maybe he knew what he meant, and he didn't feel the need to explain it to us because he was going to explain it in person to his students. That stinks for us, but
Or the student just forgot to put it down.
yeah, like reading someone else's notes. We don't know. We don't know. If these were, we don't know. There's a lot we don't know. Okay, well, let's move on from voluntary and involuntary. I feel like we've beat that horse to death. We're ready to just move on. So he says, obviously, choice is voluntary by its very definition. You don't choose to do something if you're being compelled to do it. You don't choose to do something accidentally. So whatever our definitions of involuntary, non-voluntary are, none of those acts would be something we would choose to do because they would just sort of happen or we'd be compelled. Yes, Alex? Great, please tell me what it is.
A deliberate appetite of things that lie in our top.
I had appetition.
Yes.
I had appetition too, but I didn't know if that was a real word.
Yes. So I'm going to, yes. So here's the important thing to note in the definition. Deliberate. That means it's not involuntary or non-voluntary. appetition, which is the word, is the, like, an appetite. Appetite is fine. It's desire. Okay? So a deliberate desire of things that lie in our power. That's the third thing. We don't, he said, deliberate around or choose facts of the solar system or sunrises and suns. I wonder if the sun should rise tomorrow. This is not something I deliberate over. It has to be something in my power. So he says, this is on page 57. Sorry. I think it's the grass pollen starting to do its thing, and my allergies are starting to do their thing. He says, do people deliberate about all issues? Is everything an object of deliberation? Or are there some things that do not admit of it? And he says, we don't deliberate on whether the diagonal of a square is longer than one of the sides. It just is. We don't sit around thinking about whether it should be or whether we should make it be so. We don't deliberate, he says, about solstices or droughts or rainstorms. We just can't really deliberate about those things. What we deliberate about is practical measures in our power. Weathermen opine, I feel like. Maybe they have an opinion. Opining is the verb form of having an opinion about something. But I know, I ran across that in a book once. I'm like, ooh, I like that, opine.
The word opine like 7 times in the same sentence. It's like,
And he says also on page 58, we deliberate about means, about ends, but not, I'm sorry, but about means. Okay, so in other words, generally we don't deliberate about whether or not I want to eat a cookie. We might deliberate about whether or not I should eat the cookie, you know, but I deliberate about the means to eating the cookie. So I have various means. I could bake cookies. I could go to the store and buy cookies. I could go to a bakery and get really good cookies. I could wait for Hannah to make me cookies and bring them to me. See, those are the means. And I might deliberate which one to choose. That's a silly example because you could deliberate about the eating of cookies. But so deliberate, you know, we don't deliberate about I want to be virtuous. You deliberate how. How do I reach that goal? Exactly, yes. We're going to assume, for the purposes, though, that I have already chosen to eat the cookie. So, but that deliberation is passed. So once I've chosen an end, so okay, so I've chosen the end. I've chosen the end. But you're absolutely right. That process. How? Yes. So these are things we deliberate around. He says it is a choice of a means toward an end. Now I'm going to read. I just thought this was kind of pivotal on page 60, and I just like to go through this, starting at the beginning. We have already said that wish, because he distinguishes wishing for something, because we wish things sometimes that aren't in our power. So wishing and choosing are not the same thing, right? I wish I had $1 million. I don't choose to have $1 million. I could choose to have $1 million and then deliberate the means to get the end, which I could rob a bank, I could work really hard, I could wait for a rich relative to die. I mean, there are various means. Okay, so we've already said that wish is concerned with the end. But some think that its object is the good, that when we wish for the good. And others that is the apparent good. Now, for those who hold that the object of wish is the good, people always wish for things that are good. It follows that if a person chooses wrongly, what he wishes is not an object of wish. Because if it is wishable, it must be good, but it may in fact have been bad. So if wishes are always for good things, how do I explain that I wished for a bad thing? Well, it wasn't a wish. We're just going to change the definition of wish. Maybe, but for his argument, it's like, well, we can't call it a wish anymore because it wasn't a good thing. Because if it is wishable, it must be good, but in fact, it may have been bad. That's one side. On the other hand, for those who hold that what is wished is the apparent good, it follows that nothing is by nature wishable, but that what any individual thinks is good is wishable for him. So the problem on one side, all things we wish for are good. Great. What if you wish for something bad? Oh, it wasn't a wish. On this side, all people wish for what they think is good. Oh, but is there just a good? No, it's just whatever people think is good. There is no actual good, it's just whatever's good for you. And now we're relativistic, right?
Yeah, relative good.
And different people, just a second, I'll let you talk in a minute. And different people have different, and it may be contrary views. We wish for different things. Go ahead. Oh, is that the next one? Okay, can you hold on to that for a minute? Okay, because we're leading into that. So this is the second paragraph. If these consequences are unacceptable, if we don't like either of these options, that wishes aren't really wishes if they're for something bad, or that everybody's good is their own personal good and that they can wish for whatever they want and it's good for them. If we don't like either of these, perhaps we should say that absolutely and in truth, the object of wish is the good. People desire the good. But for the individual, it is what seems good to him. So he's combining them. He's not saying, like our initial one, everybody just has their own good. There is a good. But individual people make choices based on what seems good to them. And he says, so for the man of good character, it is the true good. But for the man of bad character, it is any chance thing. All right? So, now, say your answer.
All right. Apparent good is a key. That follows our example. We will allow ourselves to choose bad things, thinking that it is our truth or our good.
This is exactly it. We choose something because at that moment, we perceive it as the good for us, but we may be mistaken. We may be driven by, as he says many times, pleasure. The pleasure of eating that thing, all right? That I know that is bad for my health. Since this is outside my purview, as I have shared with you, I'm assuming this is how people are repeatedly drunk. You would think that if somebody was just dead dog, hungover, throwing up, that they would not go do that again. But I know that people do this repeatedly. Why? Because at the moment that they are presented with the drink, it seems like a good. It is a good because it gives me the pleasure, or the feeling gives me the taste, it gives me pleasure, or because I'm so miserable, I just want to make it all go away for a little while. I'm assuming the lure of drugs would be a similar lure, the pleasure of whatever that sensation is, and also I just want to have oblivion for a while, which is very sad. But we know it's not a good. It's not the good. It's not even a good. It's a bad, right? And it's going to bite you the next morning, or it's going to bite you, when you've eaten Whitey's every day for a week, and it does sound great, doesn't it? That says a lot about me. And then you go get your, blood work done, and your blood sugar is, through the ceiling. Yeah, I test positive for Whitey's in my blood. But it seems like a good. Ooh, I'm hot. Oh, that creamy malt. It's so good. It seems like a good, but it is not a good. Do you see what I mean? I'm not saying Whitey's isn't good. I actually know one of the owners of Whitey's, so, but Mr. Thunberg, Jeff. You know what? If you work at Whitey's, you get 50% off everything. My kids all worked in the factory. They made pies and stuff in the factory. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. We don't have time to talk about that. Wow. Just like, this is a good conversation. No, this is not the good, though. We're going to go back to the good. so that we make choices, and we all have done it. You don't have to be very old. Toddlers have already done it. They have made choices in what seems good for them at the time. But their parents with a little more experience may know that is not the ultimate good. C.S. Lewis said a great thing. I may have already quoted this particular quote in this class. I'm sorry if I repeat myself to you guys. But he said that God explaining heaven, explaining eternal life, is like telling a child playing in a mud puddle that you're going to take them to the seaside. And they don't understand. But I love my mud puddle, but it's my mud puddle. And they will cry. And you know this. If you had a 3-year-old and you were going to take them to the beach and play all day and have picnics and sandcastles and run in the waves, you might have trouble dragging them away from the mud puddle. Because they just don't understand. That mud puddle is his good. And you're taking it away. So you have such a bigger good waiting. And I'm not saying the seaside is the ultimate good of mankind either, but you get the analogy, I'm sure. Here's, let me see what okay. On page 61, he makes a very interesting point, hypothesis, that I wrote a long note to myself at the bottom of this, because I feel like this is one of the moments when Aristotle is speaking to Christianity, to us as Christians, but he's missing that final piece of the puzzle through his ignorance, involuntarily. And he says this on page 61. I'm going to start 5, 6, 7, where it says therefore. Therefore, virtue lies in our power, and similarly, so does vice. Virtues and vice lie in our power because they are the result of choices, he says. Because where it is in our power to act, it is also in our power not to act. And where we can refuse, we can also comply. So if it is in our power to do a thing when it is right, it will also be in our power not to do it when it is wrong. And if it is in our power not to do it when it is right, it will also be in our power to do it when it is wrong. Runs both ways. And if it is in our power to do right and wrong, similarly not to do them, and if, as we saw, doing right or wrong is the essence of being good or bad, it follows that it is in our power to be decent or worthless. The saying, none would be evil or would not be blessed, seems to be partly false and partly true, because nobody is unwilling to be blessed. But wickedness is voluntary. Otherwise, we must dispute what we have just been saying and assert that man is not the originator or begetter of his own actions, as he of his own children. But it is manifestly true that he is, and we cannot refer our actions to any other sources than those that are in ourselves. Then the actions whose sources are in us are themselves in our power, that is, voluntary. Why are we responsible for the sin of Adam and Eve? Because we partake of it, but also because we all do it. Everyone born except one has sinned, right? And different faith traditions explain, original sin, from different directions. But we all agree on one thing. We come here messed up. And it is in our nature to choose to sin. And I feel like this is one of a two-part thing where I feel like Aristotle is so close. Like, yes, you do. We are responsible. We are responsible. But without grace, we can't change. You see, we continue to mistake the fake good for the real good. So hold on to that, but then check out what he says on the next page, 63. It's not the next page, but that middle the middle section. Again, it is unreasonable to suppose that a man who acts unjustly or licentiously does not wish to be unjust or licentious. If you choose to do unjust things, you're choosing to be an unjust person. You just are. And if anyone, without being in ignorance, acts in a way that will make him unjust, he will be voluntarily unjust. But listen to this. This is the amazing thing. But it does not follow that he can stop being unjust and be just if he wants to. No more than a sick man can become healthy, even though it may be his sickness is voluntary, being the result of incontinent living and disobeying his doctors. There was a time when it was open to him not to be ill. But when he had thrown away his chance, it was gone. Just as when one has once let go of a stone, it is too late to get it back. But the agent was responsible for throwing it, because the origin of the action was in himself. So too, it was at first open to the unjust and licentious persons not to become such, and therefore they are voluntarily what they are. But now that they have become what they are, it is no longer open to them not to be such. Now, so he's saying, okay, there once upon a time, now not for individuals but for the human race, now we'll say, there was a moment when we could choose not to be disobedient. And we chose it, and now we are disobedient, right? So you can look at this as a whole human race thing. But I don't think he's saying there's no chance for repentance. But what he's saying, any more than he's saying a sick person can't get well, because he uses a sick person as an example. But what is the sick person? Okay, so I have become ill through my own body abuse. I have smoked and drank, and I'm just like IV sugar straight into my veins. Okay, so like I'm just sugared up incredibly, and now I'm diabetic, and I can barely walk, and I'm not on life support. I'm pretty bad. Okay, and the doctor says, well, you've sugared yourself into oblivion, and and your smoking and drinking is ruining your liver and your lungs. And if you want to be well, you are going to have to completely change all your choices. Now, we know that is not easy. Habits are very hard to break, right? So we all know a certain thing, if it's an addictive substance, like nicotine. I have many family members, like my dad smoked for years and finally quit. My mom's whole family smoked when I was little, and they just couldn't quit. I mean, they finally did, but it's just like they tried and tried and tried and they couldn't quit. Once you start, it's really hard to quit. Some people have an addiction to alcohol, apparently. They just can't seem to quit without a lot of help. And I think there are probably other substances. People are arguing now that sugar has an addictive quality. It does something. And that when you eat some, you just want more, and you go looking for it. And some of us, just like alcoholics or whatever, have a greater tendency to go looking for it. It's really hard to make that choice. In fact, without help, spiritual help, I cannot make that choice. Yes, but presumably by the time you're 55 years old, one can be one's own guardian, and I'm sorry to report. So I'm not always the best guardian of myself. But yes, Ethan.
Yeah, like, even if they try to do it, like sugar, it's no addictive substance. It's not the substance itself, it's the person. When kids eat sugar, they feel good endorphins enter their brain. Yes, it's good. But what's that called again for that? Feel good.
Dopamine?
Dopamine.
Love the dopamine.
The more dopamine you have for a certain thing, that is the cooler it becomes, the more you eat it.
Yes.
And dopamine apparently comes with nicotine.
It comes with many things. In fact, they're doing research that they're, especially you guys are the target audience for this. Things online, like likes on Facebook and stuff like that. It sounds silly, but that it feeds something. They also say, this is for my generation, that there's a certain dopamine rush that comes for some people from crossing things off of your to-do list. Not kidding. I read this. That just the sense of satisfaction of getting things done. Just like so you make, and seeing all the things crossed off. What? That is a good use. Unless my list is like rob a bank, kill my neighbor's dog. I don't know. I don't know. I'm just trying to think of really bad things that I could put on my list. That's a bad thing. I don't know, because it's a bad thing. Don't do it. Yeah, just so you can cross them off. Wow. Okay, I feel like we should move on to book 4. So I'm going to say goodbye to book 3 with this comment. Oh, actually, we're not saying goodbye, but it's the bottom, page 65. He says, our dispositions, remember if you feed a disposition by repeated acts of a certain kind, our dispositions are not voluntary in the same sense that our actions are. Our actions are under our control from beginning to end because we are aware of the individual stages. But we only control the beginning of our dispositions. The individual stages of their development, as in the case of illness, are unnoticeable. And this is scary because that means if I'm feeding the wrong disposition, like I'm choosing to be an angry sort of person, a bitter sort of person, okay? And I'm feeding that disposition, it happens so slowly, just like me, just, eating brown sugar with a spoon out of the container. And then suddenly I'm diabetic. And I'm like, what happened? But it doesn't happen like that. You see, it wasn't sudden. It wasn't sudden. Oh, we've all done it. Yes. Oh, it's the nectar and ambrosia of the gods. Brown sugar. That was page 65. That was the bottom of page 65. Okay, so the point, we've been here in almost an hour. The point is that for Aristotle, these virtues that he's going to go on to describe at length now and in detail rest within our choice. And we can meet him halfway, I feel like. Through God's grace, as Christians, we can meet him halfway, is what I'm saying. Through God's grace, we are enabled to choose what without him perhaps we could not choose, but we still have to choose. God will not come down out of heaven and just zap you brave or temperate or loving or patient. It will happen little by little, and you will not notice it happening to you, the process of sanctification. But it rests on our, and so, I say this with trepidation because, it depends on, I don't know what faith traditions are represented in this room, but for some, it's really sort of anathema to suggest that there's anything we need to do. And I'm not saying you're earning your salvation. I'm not saying that. I want to make that very clear. But I am saying if you want to be a more holy sort of person, there are choices you're going to have to make. And you actually have to do it. We don't just magically become more patient without something that tries your patience. And without, at that moment, saying, God, help me be patient. God, help me be kind. And then acting in a way that maybe you don't feel on the inside right there, but you're going to choose to do it. You're going to have the kind word or the patience. And there's just no other way to become that person than to do the actions. I hope that doesn't offend or you don't think I'm a heretic now. And I'm not suggesting Jesus will not let you into heaven unless you have a certain number of good works. I'm not saying that at all. But if we want to become that full human being that he created us to be in his image, we're going to have to make the choices. But he is very willing to help us make the choices. That's the good thing. We're not on our own in this. I'm sorry, you wanted to say something. Or no, your arm was just out there. No problem. Okay. Oh, we didn't answer the final question. What are the excess and deficiency of courage? Yeah. Rashness, yes. Mm-hmm. And insufficient is cowardice. Yes.
I thought it was interesting because implies for the person who's like very audacious and no really regard for right. He says that Aristotle implies that they really aren't brave, they're just faking it. They're like, oh, look how brave I am. Maybe
Yes. And that cowardice is almost like the flip side of the coin. For the rash people may be suppressing and hiding a secret cowardice by bravado, shall we say. Yes, that is interesting. How about self-control? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Bravery isn't like an in-moment like decision like, oh, I'm going to be brave. It's more of a, like you said, kind of disposition where it's like, it feels just natural to me to be brave.
Yes, so he goes through, if you remember, he goes through 5 things that are similar, that look like bravery, but aren't necessarily. One is just being high-spirited, just being an action sort, I just like activity. One is ignorance. I didn't know the danger. Yeah, and I just didn't know. And that's not brave. He said optimism. Well, things usually turn out okay. I think it'll all be okay. That's not bravery. It's just optimism. So it's a good point that bravery other things can masquerade as true bravery. But that's important. It's always a disposition for Aristotle, a habit that you have cultivated of making this decision when you are in certain circumstances. Okay, how about self-control? What are his, yeah.
This one was hard, but the self-control is usually a good thing. It's easy to see rashness being bad.
Yes.
Self-control is usually a good thing, but like whenever your self-control puts someone else at risk, or your life at risk, like maybe you're saying, hold on, I'm trying to pull up a good hypothetical. I'm a pyromaniac and I'm not going to start any fires whatsoever.
I'm so glad to hear that.
You're out in the middle of the wilderness and you need a campfire, but you refuse to light a fire.
Yes.
And then there's abandon where you have absolutely zero self-control.
Yeah, he uses this self-control in the sense of temperance, often for pleasures. Although that was a very good illustration. And he says often, if you're dealing with, and I suppose the pyromaniac finds pleasure in lighting the fire. That's what makes him the pyromaniac, doesn't it? So it is a matter of pleasure. That we tend to go one way more than the other. Most of us tend to be enticed by pleasures to go overboard, rather than to be deficient in pleasures. Like the deficient person who just doesn't take pleasure in anything. I don't even think he gives him a name really, because he said that's not really very many, doesn't really exist. Like somebody who just doesn't feel pleasures. Okay, awesome. No, I think I found it. And I think it's, no, I'm talking about temperance. It's the 75. He says temperance or self-control. Insensibility. Thank you.
So in his opinion, it's kind of like the bravery or courage thing. Like obviously the coward who's just a coward is not going to do it, and the really audacious person is trying to turn bravery into choice. And this, for self-control, it's both extremes where you really don't have self-control, so either you just give in and it's just like whatever, or you're just like absolutely not, because as soon as I know I'm presented with it, I will not be able to.
Yes, yes. Although I would take it one step further, Matthew, and say that on that latter one, that he's actually trying to describe someone not that just turns away and won't even partake a little bit because they're afraid they won't be able to stop themselves, but they actually just don't even feel any desire for it. It's like presenting me with sauerkraut. Like I don't have to have any self-control with sauerkraut. No, thank you, no. Hot peppers, no self-control involved here, because I don't even want it. So I'm lacking the desire, but what if you lack the desire for all those pleasures? Then you'd be that insensible person. I like your description, but I think he's saying this person, the deficiency end, is so deficient in pleasure that they just don't even feel anything. And that's why he says, I don't even know what to call that, because I don't really meet people like that. Most people swing the other way. Do you know what I mean? They have to pull themselves back a little bit because they're enticed. Let's move on to book 4, because we are, oh gosh. So what about prodigal people? What are their potential pitfalls? Okay, they don't care who they might give to. Okay, so prodigal, in this sense, is spending, overspending. So his two were illiberality. This is the liberal man. He gives to whom he should, when he should, as much as he should. Okay? Well, but Aristotle already said these are all relative. He said it is the mean relative to you. So that's going to change depending on the person. Okay? So the illiberal person is tight-fisted and they won't give a cent to anybody. But the prodigal person is, I got money to burn. Let's just spend it until we end up eating pig, food, like the prodigal son. Yes. Yes, so Lauren gave us one, which was, he'll say, I'm already forgotten, Lauren. Okay, so you're not very discerning, so that give to who you should, see, that's already out the window, because I'll just, anybody, anytime, I will give. What were you going to add? You don't care for your finances. Okay, and what happens when you, well, you go ahead, but what happens when you don't care for your finances? And when you run out, now you need more. Because if you have that disposition, I just love to spend money. I just love to spend money. Now I'm going to start maybe getting money from sources that are not the best sources because I need a fix. Just like a drug abuser, needs a new fix. I need a money fix so I can go spend more money. So maybe I'm gambling, maybe I got a loan shark involved here, maybe, I'll take money from anywhere, anytime, because now I can spend it. He says they also tend to be indulgent. They tend to be the non-temperate sort, okay? Because what do they spend their money on? Most often, pleasures. And, they wouldn't necessarily be bodily pleasures. I picture the prodigal son. I think when I was little, I saw a movie version of the prodigal. It was like an updated, modern version of the prodigal son. It was little in some church. I don't know. And anyway, so I have an image of this in my head, and spending it on friends. Like in this movie version, he had a bunch of young companions, and they're partying all the time. And the scenario where everyone loves you as long as the party lasts, but when you run out of money and the party is over, everybody leaves. That sort of scenario, and that can be a pleasure too, right? Like I'm having a big blowout and inviting all my friends as long as I can keep the party going. If any of you have ever read the book The Great Gatsby, I have a picture of Jay Gatsby and his endless parties at his estate where the party never ends because he's just got money and money and money to spend and people don't even know him. They just show up because there's the party. So you're not very discerning. When you're just spending and spending and spending, you become maybe not very discerning. He does interestingly say that he thinks illiberality, being tight-fisted, is worse than being prodigal. And that was the next question I asked you. What did anybody write for that? Do you have an answer?
I also have a Bible.
Oh, yes, please.
Deal with that. It's sinful to do something sinful, but also if you don't do the right thing. Like
Yes.
You can help someone, but you choose not to.
And it's common.
Oh, and omission, exactly.
Yeah, I forgot that. But illiberality, you would end up not helping anyone.
Okay,
And
yes.
you're finding the need and you're like, oh, I can't spare it. Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
oh,
Anybody want to add?
This is to the question, why does Aristotle
The illiberality. Being tight-fisted is worse than overspending.
The former is only in need of a slight correction in order to become liberal, while the latter is made up of a completely viceable disposition. It's like if you're giving a lot, it's like, okay, just tone it down. Like,
Yes.
more
Discerning.
discerning. But if you're just not wanting to give up anything,
Yeah.
that's going to be a lot more.
Yeah. Prodigality also tends to be friendly, if you know what I mean. Like it's, yes. But so my illiberality is Ebenezer Scrooge in my head. Okay, I'm picturing every Christmas Eve we watch the musical Scrooge with Albert Finney, and so I have this indelible picture of Albert Finney being, tight-fisted and going and asking for all his, debtors for money on Christmas Eve, and they're all poor and they can't pay him. And he's counting his coins, and putting them on the little. He won't spend. He needs ghosts. Okay, he needs divine intervention, right, to become the liberal man. But the prodigal man, like you said, has already got the idea that wealth is not to be hoarded; it's to be shared. But we just need to teach you what and is the appropriate time, and with whom. Aristotle says that it's the mark not of a worthless or low person, but of a foolish one to be prodigal. The prodigal is foolish and needs correction. The illiberal man is just mean. He also says prodigality is easily corrected when you run out of money. You know what I mean? But it's hard to correct if you're hoarding money. You know what I mean? Where's the end? Yes. Do you know, I wonder how many of these spectrums of virtue one might swing. Yeah, so that you might, what? Say again? Well, in Aristotle's version, so that like we have temperance in the middle, so we have courage in the middle, and here we have rashness, and here we have cowardice. That maybe if you were rash and it went poorly, you become a coward. Or if you're mocked, there was a guy two guys left Thermopylae. They went on a mission, okay? Leonidas sent them, two Spartan guys, and they heard that the Persians were surrounding them, and that if they didn't get back right away, they wouldn't get back to Thermopylae at all. And they were both wounded. One of them chose to skedaddle his way back to Thermopylae, and he got in before the Persians closed the pass off, and he died there. The other guy chose not to go. He never lived it down. The shame of being a Spartan warrior, and he was wounded. Like, he had a legitimate excuse. And later on, in another later battle with the Persians, he died. But man, he cut quite a path before he did. He went out there. I don't know that he was the rash man, but he was accused of cowardice, you see. And so he's like, I'm going to show you. I'm going down, and I'm taking as many of you with me as I can. And he put on quite a show before he died. But he was motivated by that accusation of cowardice. Yes. Yeah. It could be.
It's like the middle is kind of the virtuous hard thing to do. So it's like a bright ball in the middle. And you kind of want to skirt around the sides.
Yeah.
It's like if you're a drug addict, it's much easier just to become addicted to different So it's like you're just an extreme kind of be like,
Just substitute one for the other. Thank you. That was a very interesting insight. I want to bump over to the magnanimous man. I asked you if there was anything about the magnanimous man that you admired or that you looked or found unadmirable. On page 93, he describes this man. A person is considered to be magnanimous if he thinks that he is worthy of great things, provided he is worthy of them. Because anyone who esteems his own worth unduly is foolish, and nobody who acts virtuously is foolish or stupid. So the magnanimous man says, I am being honored and I am worthy of being honored. I acknowledge that.
I have a lot to say about this.
You lay it on us.
Like, although he tries to live up to great titles, he might have, he might actually do those. Like if he wants to be known as a great man who gives to charity, he might give to charity, but that's not a virtue. He's doing it for the title, not because it's good. So, yeah.
Yes.
So he suffers from pride,
Okay.
idolatry, and hypocrisy. Yeah.
You're pretty rough on the magnanimous man.
Virtuous.
Aristotle says the man who thinks he is worthy of great things, although he is not worthy of them, is conceited. But not everybody is conceited who has too high an opinion of his own worth. On the other hand, the man who has too low an opinion is pusillanimous. I like that, pusillanimous. And it makes no difference whether his worth is great or moderate or little if his opinion of it is too low. So he says, and this doesn't sound so bad, the magnanimous man estimates himself at his true worth. But that part doesn't sound so bad. In fact, I've heard humility being described as recognizing yourself for who you really are, so to speak. So it's not humble. Yes, it's not humble. So Hannah brings in cookies, and it's okay for Hannah to say, yeah, these cookies turned out pretty good. Because it's not lack of humility in you. That's recognizing you have worked, you have a skill in baking, and that these turned out good. But the person, we're going to talk more about this person later, the person's like, oh, yeah, well, thank you, but these I always have trouble with this. And, I think this one was burnt a little on the edge. And, and it's almost like fishing for compliments, but you go overboard denying that you did something well. And it's just almost obnoxious. Some people do this, and so, and I don't know that that's humility necessarily, because it's not even really telling the truth. If you really think, yeah, this one was good. This one turned out good. Like I've had some that haven't turned out good in the past. This one turned out pretty good. I'm pleased. So in that case, like, okay, I'm all right with the magnanimous man. He recognizes his status, and of course, as human beings and as fallen human beings, true humility would be to realize we are creatures who have fallen from great height, right? That is who we are. We are made in the image of God. This is good. We are fallen creatures. We are not the creator. And that's humility, right? But Aristotle goes on to say, he goes on for many pages. Let me see. He is disposed to confer benefits, but is ashamed to accept them, because the one is the act of a superior and the other that of an inferior. All right, some people don't like to ask for help. And we all like giving people help, right? But his motivation, this magnanimous man, is if I confer a benefit on you, I'm above you now. You see, you sort of owe me. But if I ask you for something, see, now I'm below you and I owe you and I don't want to owe you, so I don't want to ask. Do you see how it's not wrong to benefit someone, it's not wrong to ask, but the motivation behind it can make it so, yes.
That's
Mm-hmm.
And then the opposite, you take the picture and you just below it.
I don't know. A what? Manipulation? It is a form of manipulation. I will help you because now you will owe me. But this is the motivation. This is when the magnanimous man starts to smell a little fishy to me. You know, like, oh, I was okay with him before. Okay, he's honorable and he's worthy of honor and he's being honored and he's worthy of being honored. But now, no. It says he never, only reluctantly makes a request. The tasks he undertakes are few, but they are grand and celebrated. It says, I don't want to do just anything. I want it to be spectacular when I do it, because then everybody's going to be talking about me. All right? I don't think the magnanimous man is going to help behind the scenes. He's never going to be a behind the scenes sort of guy, right? A support or a help. He says, Aristotle says, he does not enter for popular contests or ones in which others distinguish themselves. He hangs back or does nothing at all except when the honor or the feat is a great one. He does not care for personal conversation. He will neither talk about himself nor about anyone else, because he does not care to be complimented himself or to hear others criticized, nor again is he inclined to pay compliments. For this reason, he is not abusive either, not even of his enemies, unless he intends to be insulting. And I get the impression, because that's okay, I don't want to insult people. Like, that's good. He doesn't do it, however, because Aristotle goes on to say it's just beneath him. It's all just too trivial for me. It's beneath me. I don't want to deal with that. I wouldn't gossip about anyone, not because gossip is wrong, but because they're just so beneath me. Yeah, why do I care about what they're doing? See, I feel like he's a problematic sort. He's got something I admire, a accurate assessment of his own. Know thyself, all right? Because apparently he is worthy of honor in whatever way, but he's using it, and we would think this man was proud. I feel like we would just think this man, he just seems so above us. Yeah, I don't go to, I don't go to the, county fairs, because I will only go to the large amusement parks, The county fairs are beneath me with their cute little rides, I would never do that. It just sounds very... I know. I'm saying if you said that sort of thing is beneath my dignity, there's very few things that are beneath our dignity, right? If they're morally okay. Yeah, magnanimous man. He's kind of I don't know. He talks about a little bit of anger and patience, but I would like to pop up to this last line. And he talks about amiability too. I like this one. Let's stop there. I'm on page 103 now.
Whoa.
I skip, because a lot of these are just sort of self-explanatory, I feel like. The mean and then the ends and just, but I liked his amiability. Friendliness. We would just, what? I did miss it. I'm sorry. See, I could have just pretended and laughed, but I don't know what. Oh, okay. See, I'm very tired today. I feel like the school year's almost over and my brain's just kind of oozing out my ears a little bit. It's really tired. We probably have seen all of these in our lives somewhere. We have the middle person who's friendly, all right? They're affectionate. in the right degree to the right people, because you know we're not affectionate to all people equally, are we? Because that'd just be kind of weird. We reserve one for our family members, one for close friends, one for, you know, people who are more like acquaintances. You know, your level of friendliness towards each other as peers might be different than your level of friendliness towards someone who is your elder, who's much older than you. It's just a different level. But just personable, friendly. His extreme is obsequiousness. Obsequious is like the suck up to you person, all right? Yeah. Yeah, and so just like I will say anything you want just to get on your good side, whether it's true or not, I will just butter you up. And that's just distasteful. We all know when somebody's doing it, I think, and maybe sometimes we've done it. It's not, you know, we can admit to being not the golden mean always. The other one is surly or quarrelsome. This is the, I don't want to talk to any of you. I feel like surly and quarrelsome can be from, okay, well, does he say? Let's just a second. Those who take the opposite line to these, offering resistance to everything and not worrying at all about causing annoyance, are called surly and quarrelsome. Okay, I'm glad I went back to look at that, because we all know, and some of us may be, rather introverted. It just takes a lot of energy to engage in small talk with people, and we're just not good at it. I myself don't think I'm very good at, I hate the ladies' luncheon sort of things. It's just ghastly. I don't know what to say to these women. They don't want to talk about books. Talk about stuff I don't care about. I just have to smile and be nice. Just pass the food. I'm smiling and being nice. And that's how I feel. But I don't think I'm surly or quarrelsome. Do you see what I mean? I'm not, I don't cause annoyance purposely. I just don't know what to say. That's a different sort of thing. Yes. I don't know what to say to you because I don't have the same interests as the average, middle-aged woman. And I don't want to talk about the things that you're interested in, and you don't want to talk about my things, and I don't know what to say to you. But that's not causing annoyance, you see. And I go along with it and try to talk about drapes and carpet. You sound like all middle-aged women think about is drapes and carpet. That is just really, no, they're not bad. I just don't care. Not a big house decorator. But the thing that he went to the end here, he talks about boasters and sincerity, but at the very end, this is the end of, no, it's not. I'm sorry, almost at the end, page 107. He's talking about the sincere or truthful man. That's the middle. The boaster or exaggerator, that's one end. And the irony or self-deprecation, that's more like Hannah and her cookies, okay? When Hannah was trying to convince us that she doesn't make good cookies, that they're never good, and she's being self-deprecating, okay? It's when someone says, oh, what a nice dress. Oh, it's not very nice. Oh, I just found it at Goodwill, and it's got a little stain on it, and you have to show, and there's a little thread hanging. And you have to show them everything that's wrong with your dress, for crying out loud. Just say thank you. Thank you. You could, and I often do, because Goodwill is an awesome place to shop. Look what I found at Goodwill. But he says on page 107, ironical people who employ understatement appear more attractive in character than boasters, because their object is felt to be not profit, but the avoidance of ostentation. All right, boasters just want to show off. And we kind of like the understated, the ironical, the self-deprecator a little more, because at least they're not trying to show off. He says they also especially disclaim qualities that are held in general regard, as Socrates used to do. And it's a disclaiming wisdom. Those who disclaim trifling or commonplace qualities are called pretentious humbugs. That's the technical philosophical term. Humbugs. And invite greater contempt. Sometimes their conduct has the appearance of boasting. For instance, Spartan dress. Look how simple we are. Look how simple our clothes are. check out our black broth. You see, and the whole point was to be understated and simple, but it becomes a show. Because, and this is the line I asked you to explain, because exaggerated deficiency is as ostentatious as excess. That was your line. What does he mean? I kind of led you that direction. I'm giving it to Lauren. Yes. It is a form of boasting. You want to add to that? Yeah, go.
Yeah, it's usually just an intention.
They have the same goal, don't they? When I boast, I am trying to draw attention to myself. And when I defer all compliments, it is also because I want to draw attention to myself. Well, this made me immediately think of a passage in the Screwtape Letters, which I have got to read for you. How many of you have had the great joy of reading the Screwtape Letters? Awesome. For those of you who have not, first of all, I highly recommend it. This is, because C.S. Lewis is always brilliant. In this book, C.S. Lewis, this is a series of letters, made up, obviously, from a senior demon named Wormwood to his protege, Screwtape. And Screwtape has been put in charge of tempting a certain British man away from the faith and down the path to hell. And Wormwood is giving him advice on how to lure this man away from God. And I know, you're just like, what? But in doing so, first of all, it's a brilliant insight into some of the ways Satan toys with us and how to overthrow him, because it's like looking at the enemy's battle plans. See, how do they do this? How do they get us to think this way and do these things? So, in this particular one, he's writing to the patient. He calls him his patient, all right, the one he's tempting. Because there's another demon named Glubos, and Glubos is assigned to the patient's mother. He's been working on the mother. And this is a description of the patient's mother. My dear Wormwood. Oh, I guess Screwtape is the senior one, and Wormwood is I'm sorry, I reversed it. Screwtape is the head one, and Wormwood is the protege. Doesn't matter. My dear Wormwood, the contemptuous way in which you spoke of gluttony as a means of catching souls in your last letter only shows your ignorance. One of the great achievements of the last 100 years has been to deaden the human conscience on this subject, so that by now you will hardly find a sermon preached or a conscience troubled about it in the whole length or breadth of Europe. This has largely been effected by concentrating all our efforts on gluttony of delicacy, not gluttony of excess. Your patient's mother, as I learned from the dossier, and you might have learned from Glubos, is a good example. She would be astonished, one day I hope will be, to learn that her whole life is enslaved to this kind of sensuality, which is quite concealed from her by the fact that the quantities involved are small. But what do quantities matter, provided we can use a human belly and palate to produce querulousness, impatience, uncharitableness, and self-concern? Glubos has this old woman well in hand. She is a positive terror to hostess and servants. She is always turning from what has been offered her to say with a demure little sigh and a smile, "Oh, please, please, all I want is a cup of tea, weak but not too weak, and the teeniest, weeniest bit of really crisp toast." You see, because what she wants is smaller and less costly than what has been set before her. She never recognizes as gluttony her determination to get what she wants, however troublesome it may be to others. At the very moment of indulging her appetite, she believes that she is practicing temperance. In a crowded restaurant, she gives a little scream at the plate which some overworked waitress has set before her and says, "Oh, that's far too much. Take it away and bring me about a quarter of it." If challenged, she would say she was doing this to avoid waste. In reality, she does it because the particular shade of delicacy to which we have enslaved her is offended by the sight of more food than she happens to want. The real value of the quiet, unobtrusive work which Glubos has been doing for years on this old woman can be gauged by the way in which her belly now dominates her whole life. The woman is in what may be called a all I want state of mind. All she wants is a cup of tea properly made, or an egg properly boiled, or a slice of bread properly toasted. But she never finds any servant or any friend who can do these simple things properly, because her properly conceals an insatiable demand for the exact, almost impossible, palatal pleasures which she imagines she remembers from the past. A past described by her as the days when you could get good servants, but known to us as the days when her senses were more easily pleased, and she had pleasures of other kinds, which made her less dependent on those of the table. Meanwhile, the daily disappointment produces daily ill temper, cooks give notice, and friendships are cooled. If ever the enemy introduces into her mind a faint suspicion that she is too interested in food, Glubose counters it by suggesting to her that she doesn't mind what she eats herself, but does like to have nice things for her boy. In fact, of course, her greed has been one of the chief sources of his domestic discomfort for many years. This old woman, oh, I don't want that. Oh, that's too much. Oh, please, no, I don't want to trouble you. Exaggerated, what was it? Exaggerated something is well, exaggerated. Yeah, exaggerated deficiency is as ostentatious as excess. That was the first thing that came into my mind. That when you make a big deal about not wanting much, when you make a big deal about it not being much, you can be as showing off as the person who demands everything. This old woman is showing off. But all I want is a piece of toast and a little cup of tea. Well, why don't you just take what you've been given and eat the part you want and say thank you and not cause people all this problem by being so fussy. Do you see what I mean? Like but she doesn't know. Because her demon Glubose in this book, and I'm not saying demons write letters to each other like this, it's fiction. But this is to convince you that what you're doing is actually a virtue. That is clever. And so, the Spartans, they start out, great, we are very simple, our Spartan dress and our black bra. But when it becomes, look at us, look how simple our clothes are, look how crummy our black broth is, and it becomes a point of pride. And it's not a virtue anymore, is it? Okay. So for next week, you're reading Book 8. Now, in your reading guide, I decided not to read all of Book 10. You're welcome to read anything you want to. Don't care. But I marked in your reading guide, I put start on chapter 6, I think it was, or at this line, this number, this line, because I thought that the beginning of chapter 10 was a little bit dry and just not going to grab you guys as much, and maybe I was wrong because I thought you were going to struggle with the whole thing, so I was off base. But that's what the questions are based on. If you want to read all of Book 10, it's fine, but we're reading all of Book 8, which is about friendship. How do we assess friendships? And then Book 10, which is about happiness. Oh, and for next week, I would like one more short answer, all right? I will not be able to give it back to you until those of you that I see next year, I will, or I can scan it into some of you and send it, but I would just like to know what you think on this. Would Aristotle consider most modern Americans happy in his sense, or even in a modern sense of happiness? By the way, you will be helped on this by writing it after you read the section of Book 10. All right? I would read Aristotle first. I would finish your reading for the week, and then sit down and write your paragraph, okay? Would Aristotle think modern Americans were happy? That's it. And I will see you next time for our last time. But you can work on your parents, like I said, but if nobody's interested in taking me up on the May 4th thing, not offended, all right?